You know about Lent, but that song right there is the perfect tune to cover the season of suffering and awakening. Perfect. Agreed? Agreed. Look at all of you. Got out of bed, maybe took a shower, got dressed, showed up at Unity. It's a miracle. Wow. Bless your hearts. What did we learn as young little toddler people that we needed to be or do in order to cope or survive within our family system? Defensiveness? Oh, not in my family. I remember working with my spiritual tormentor, Martha Creek, and it was a few years ago, but she posed the question one day in one of our sessions, and she said, what if we had no thing to defend? That's a lot of freedom. What if we had no thing to defend? So maybe we need to break through defensiveness. Maybe we need to break through the blinder syndrome of denial. Maybe we need to break through our trepidation or unwillingness to deeply look at ourselves. Identifying our barriers is critical spiritual work. So if you don't already know what your barrier or barriers are, I think this Lenten season is a fine time to pick up a mirror. Like as close, but not so close that you can't see yourself. You know, it depends on your vision, right? Pick up a mirror, because seeing our own barriers, they are no one else's, and they are about no one else. Hear me. Our barriers are about no one else. So seeing our barriers is a huge breakthrough, because in that holy moment, I believe, I act in a place of having to defend my every thought, my every act, my every emotion. That's a huge breakthrough to see that. So in that holy moment, we lean into spirit. And here's our prayer. Here I am. I am willing. And some of us may be willing to be willing. I am willing to be healed at depth. So the writer poses this question: why is this an effective Lenten practice? I love the response. They say, because it gets our attention every day for 40 days. And personally, I'm starting my personal Lent practice tomorrow. So I'm a little off the calendar, but that's okay with me. So what happens in this breakthrough and this, literally, it's the on our knees moment where we say, I am willing to be healed at depth. What happens in that divine appointment is that it allows God's grace into our soul. And that's right where Jesus stands with us every day, yearning for us to see our wholeness. Now, can we see some parallels? I mean, some of that sounds a lot like New Thought teachings, yes? Like a lot of it sounds like New Thought teachings. And we're going to turn to Keep a True Lent. The foreword in this book is written by a long time ago Unity minister named Georgia Tree West. Here's what she says about Lent. Lent is a church-created practice embodying the idea of cleansing body and mind to the end of making them more receptive to Christ ideas. So when I read that, I thought, well, you got to have spirit on that list. Cleansing body, mind, and spirit. She says, when we consider Lent as a well-rounded season of retreat from the things in the world, a well-rounded season of retreat from the things in the world for the cleansing of the mind and the recall of the things of spirit. It becomes a true season of preparation for Eastertide. She points out that like many other religious customs, which was kind of sort of one of the points in last week's paper, like many other religious customs, Lent is often practiced to the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law. I might make a big deal about giving up chocolate for 40 days and make that the point of my quest. Believe me, that will never happen. But I could. It would be a big thing for me to do. And for that 40 days, that would be my quest. Another day without chocolate. And I'm not so sure that Spirit is interested in whether or not I eat chocolate. So, it's like my Easter motto. It ain't about the bunny. It's not about the chocolate bunnies. So she says that the true purpose or meaning of the Lenten season are the two spiritual activities of prayer and fasting. Those practices are the sure way to cleanse and purify the soul, and that creates an opening within us to commune, to connect, to feel divine presence. And the other thing is, she says that our personal Lenten practices aren't for public display. They're not about gaining outer recognition. The Lenten practice, as we said, is about communing and connecting. And the thing I love about it, and one of the things I deeply appreciate about Unity, is that it's in our own personal way. It's a very unique and individualized process. So we connect, we commune with Source, with divine mind, with divine love, with principle, and that is a very unique and personal journey for each of us. The true point of abstinence from food, from drink, from habits, is that we consciously create space in mind, body, spirit for focus and concentration on only God, only Spirit, only divine love, only life with a capital L. So, as you can see, if you remember some of the thoughts from last week about how those outside, here's the subtext that I read. Those outside of fundamentalist Christianity are not getting Lent right. So you can see that there are some contrasts there, and that the New Thought viewpoint is that Lent is so much more about alignment with God than it is suffering. Not to say that we're not allowed to suffer during Lent. I intend to suffer mightily, and my resurrection is going to be amazing. So here's the basis of New Thought, because it evolves out of traditional Christian consciousness to a new perspective on viewing and practicing the teachings from the Bible, and particularly the teachings from our way shower, Jesus. She has a little quote that I want to share. If we would lose the bands of wickedness, we must learn to fast from all unworthy thought and feast on the good and the true. To observe Lent according to the Spirit rather than the letter, we must fast from criticism and condemnation and feast in love. Fast from false beliefs in sickness and weakness, and feast on the truth of God's omnipresent, perfect life. Fast from false beliefs in lack and limitation, and feast on the truth of God's bountiful goodwill. when we withdraw our attention, our interest, and support from the false and from the unworthy, this is true fasting. Yes? This is true fasting. The fact is that in New Thought, we don't necessarily have rules about Lent. We don't have rules about a lot, which is why I'm here. Rather, we advocate a daily personal spiritual practice that brings the Christ consciousness alive, brings it alive in us. And the question has been asked, if God is perfect and we are made in God's image and likeness, why should there be any imperfection in humankind? That's a good question. Because, it says right in the first creation story, let us make them in our image and our likeness. So, Fillmore says, the answer is that there is no imperfection in humankind. Wow. What if we could look at that Lenten mirror and see perfection? He says there's no imperfection in humankind. We are perfect potentiality proving itself. We are perfect potentiality, all the potential within us. And I say on a regular basis, we came in with everything we need to be that unique expression of the divine. And Fillmore talks about, it's a process that proving our potential perfection. Have you noticed? It's a process. I think we stepped into the world perfectly, right? Did anybody ever meet a newborn that you thought was imperfect? So we come in from Godland, from spirit realm, and on this hand, we know that we are divine beings, and then we step through the veil in these little skin suits, and we forget a whole bunch. So then we use the rest of our days on earth figuring out what we already really know. So it's through our processes of navigating the tricky waters of life while we are anchoring in divine presence that we shall, day by day, find within ourselves an unfolding spiritual awakening and a resurrection of thought. Now, this was once believed that it would come to us in a flash in our graves. So here's the good news from New Thought. We can do it here in this realm, in this skin suit, in this mind, body, spirit. Lent is a season of unfolding and awakening and a rising up in consciousness. Sounds like an epiphany to me. Something that comes to us that's such a divine idea and so complete and so whole, and we can see it so clearly, and we have spirit to guide us on those steps to continue proving our potentiality. We had this debate one time in ministerial school by my favorite instructor, Don Jennings, and he said, so this spiritual awakening, this awareness, this epiphany, he said, is that a once-in-a-lifetime deal? How many of us think it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal? Whoa, I had some classmates that believed that. So how many of us think it's a process? Yeah. It's a lifetime. Like our hospice nurse said, after a dear congregant stepped through the veil, we live our whole lives for this moment. We live our whole lives for proving potentiality. We live our whole lives for awakening, for the unfolding of the divine nature. It's the stuff of which we are made, that divine nature. So we're getting the point from our Unity co-founder, Charles Fillmore, that Lent is a season of spiritual growth. It's a time for progressive, and I would say intentional, unfoldment. Fillmore said that when we can blend our mind with God mind, the way is open for Spirit to lift us into a higher, more purified spiritual state. So I think the bottom line of Lent, from a New Thought perspective, is about looking in that mirror, looking at who we are being, giving some reflection to who did we come here to be. And it's an interesting process to be able to look in that mirror and not find fault. We're not looking for something that's wrong with us. We're looking for what could be greater, what could be more spiritual, what could be more divine, what could be more loving, what could be more kind and more compassionate, what can I change? So in the next 5 weeks, while I am on my Lenten sabbatical, I invite you to sit with those questions. What is it that I need to change, want to change, could change? What are the barriers that stand between me and proving that potentiality? And the great question, I think, is what would it cost me to make that change? And the other side of that coin is, what are the benefits and payoffs for me for continuing the way I am? There's one in there, I guarantee you. What do I need to change? What are the barriers? What will it cost me? Here I am. Here I am. I am willing. Heal me at depth. Lean into that chair. Notice your level of comfort. Notice that in this now moment, we are fully supported. If we so choose to take this journey of transformation and of change, then let us come within to what Fillmore calls our inner altar. Let us come within to that space. Maybe one of those questions is rising up in our heart. Maybe we've been through this part of the journey recently. The Lenten season is dates on a calendar, but it happens when it needs to happen. As we step into the sacred, sacred silence, let this be our prayer. Here I am. Have your way in me. I am deeply willing to be healed and to be whole at depth. Be still and know that God is in the midst. And so it is. Amen.